Life should not be a journey to the grave with the intention of arriving safely in an attractive and well-preserved body, but rather a skidding sideways, champagne in one hand, strawberries in the other, thoroughly used up, totally worn out, screaming, "Woohoo, what a ride!" Hello and welcome to the Mind Detox podcast. Here, we're going to discover a new way to think, feel and heal while exploring our spiritual side. I'm your host, Sandy Newbigging, also known as the Mind Detox Monk, because, well, I'm a monk and a meditation teacher, and for the past 15 years or so, I've been working with people from around the world using a method that I accidentally created called Mind Detox. Mind Detox is all about curing the unconscious causes of physical, emotional, or life issues. So stick around if something is going on in your body, emotions, or life, and you don't know why, because we'll be exploring the possible mind-based causes during this or an upcoming episode. As a monk who's written 12 books and meditated for thousands of hours, the topics of inner peace and living in the present moment will most likely be a thread that runs through many of our episodes. So stick around again if you want to stress less and be still more. This podcast includes highlights from my online club and academy meetings, expert interviews, guided meditations, and more. All so that you can cure the cause and master peace. For today's episode, I'm sharing highlights from one of my recent online club meetings, which you can join at minddetox.club. I begin by talking about how current world events may actually be both challenging and strangely satisfying our fundamental human needs, and how life may be less about survival of the fittest and more about survival of the freest. Okay, so I put out to you guys in the WhatsApp group, what might you want me to work on? I've been having lots of one-on-one consultations. I've been keeping my ear to the ground as to how people are finding everything that's going on in the world. What's it like for them? And I have heard 3 F's come up time and time again. 3 F's. And it's not the F that you might think. If it's that F has come to mind, that's not the F that I'm referring to. But there's kind of 3 F's that have generally been talked about over and over again when it comes to people's experience and how they're dealing with and handling what's going on in the world. Because it's not necessarily only the pandemic, it's many spin-off things as well that as you know, that's coming with it. And so I'm curious if we've got one guest in the chat box, and you guys are doing pretty well so far. Yeah, you're doing pretty well so far. You've got 2 of them already, which is great. Someone's laughing, this false news. I wasn't going to go there. I'm not going to go there. I'm trying to keep this relatively conspiracy free where we are right now. So yes, these 3 S's: fear, frustration, and fatigue. The 3 S's that I'm hearing time and time again are people are going through either fear, they're pretty scared right now, they're pretty worried and anxious of what might happen, what's happening, if they might catch this thing, what might happen if someone they care about catches it, what's going to happen with my job, my business, fear, whatever it might be. We've also got frustration. And that frustration ranges from mild annoyance through to words I probably can't share if we're trying to keep this swear word free. But this frustration of feeling like almost like a victim to what's going on, at the effect of people, politicians, policies and systems that are coming into place. This frustration of just not being able to get on with and living like how you like to live, and being able to do what you want to do, and being able to go where you want to go, and see your family and hang out with friends, more than 6 or whatever it might be, wherever you happen to be. I'm one of these people that I would like to see my parents at some point. You know, they're in their 70s, and my time with them, my visits with them are really precious to me. And I've not been able to see them for almost a year already. And then we've got fatigue. They're just either over it, they are tired of it, and they are physically feeling the effects of either the isolation, the constant barrage of negativity and news and conversations about it and blah, blah, blah. So what I've observed and what I'm seeing happening is like it's almost like a mass grieving that's going on. And earlier, when I asked people in the WhatsApp group, you know, what would you like me to talk about, the word grief came up. Now, I appreciate in that moment, it might have been, you know, raised by that person potentially relating to losing a person. But we're actually, in a way, going through a collective grieving process for the world we used to have, the freedoms we used to have, the access to travel and getting to the supermarket without having to queue up, wear masks and all that sort of stuff. So there can be like a sense of loss. And the reason I want to highlight it is because you might be going through these 3 Fs, and maybe me sharing this, it might be relevant for you. You might go, actually, you know what? These 3 Fs are kind of coming from an underlying kind of sense of loss of some kind. And it's kind of like a loss of what's been known. It's a loss of the norm that we're used to. And maybe it could be a loss of company. It ultimately is like this sense and appearance of things being taken away that you liked having, whatever that might be for you. Does this make any sense, guys? Can you give me some feedback in the chat box if you can see the potential correlation between these 3 Fs and this kind of underlying potential cause of what we could collectively call grief? Now, one of the things that we have lost in a way is this interesting combination of variety or uncertainty and certainty. And so at this point, I want to kind of lead us into just a few moments. You know, I'm never one to like have us all kind of swim around in the problem, and I never encourage intentional suffering. And I don't want us to be like, oh, woe's me and stuff. But I do want us to take a moment to appreciate that it's okay. It's okay if you haven't necessarily been finding this completely easy the whole time. It's okay. Why? Because they're at the base level, we have certain human needs. And the research I've explored over the last number of years, and I came across this years and years ago, was like there's kind of 5 primary human needs that if these aren't being met, then we usually feel like something's either wrong or lacking or needs to be changed. You can apply these to a job that you're in if you're not satisfied. You can apply it to a relationship you're in if you're not completely satisfied. If these human needs aren't being met, like I say, there can be a sense of discontentment or sense of something wrong. So the first human need is this kind of desire for certainty. And in the current climate, we don't necessarily know what's going to happen next. We don't know if we're going to be able to travel freely. or if we're going to have to get some sort of chemical stabbed into our arm or something in order to get a little vaccine passport that will allow us to cross border. We don't know what's going to happen. I'm not trying to freak you out here, guys. I'm just saying there's certain things that we just don't know about. We don't know. We're told in Spain, where I am, that it's a 2-week lockdown. But we know the last 2-week lockdown kind of turned into 3 months. So, there's not that much certainty there, because it's like, it could be 2 weeks. It's probably just then kind of making the news easier to swallow. They can probably handle the prospect of 2 weeks. But when we get to 2 weeks, we'll be like, we've not flattened the curve. The hospitals are still at risk. The cases are still on the rise, or whatever they might give us, and then they might move the goalposts or whatever. But so this kind of sense of certainty is not as certain as it used to be, let's say, a year ago today. Now, there was obviously a year ago, there were certain things that wasn't necessarily certain then and too, but I'm talking about collectively what we're going through as a global team. There's a little bit less, or quite a lot less certainty. Now, that certainty could also be about, am I going to have enough money? Is there going to be a great financial reset? And what is that going to even mean? Are people going to be able to still buy products and want to, or whatever? So it can do with money. It can be, do I have certainty that I'm going to be able to see my family again? When am I going to see them? So this certainty thing is a human need. Is that clear, guys? Can you relate to liking some certainty in your world? Does that make sense? Okay. Thank you, Moira. Yeah, everything out of control. Exactly. Now, here's an interesting thing with the human needs. If everything was certain, we also wouldn't be that satisfied. If everything was inevitable, we knew everything that was going to happen in our day, what would it be? Pretty quickly, boring is the first word that comes to mind. It'd be pretty boring. And this is why people are like, I just want to get all my goals. Do you really? Is it true that you really want to get all your goals? Seriously? Because if you're honest with yourself, if you wrote down every single thing you wanted and it all came very quickly, it would get a bit boring. If you knew when watching a movie, everything that was going to happen in that movie, well, okay, I know there's some movies you love and you might watch multiple times, but you might get my point. If you're watching a movie, every single thing, and there's no suspense, there's no twists and turns, there's no will they, won't they, which is basically at the heart of almost every movie. Will they, won't they? Will they kiss at the end? Will they get together? Or whatever. If we didn't have that will they, won't they, it's not that good a movie. And when it comes to the movie of our life, which is the makings of your own personal movie masterpiece or classic, we want a little bit variety or uncertainty, same. And we do have quite a lot of that. So if we look into the human needs, actually what's going on right now is strangely satisfying. At some level, we're kind of liking this ride. If we're honest with ourselves, whoops. But it's bad. I know, but it's kind of exciting too. We've never done this before. We've never gone through this with the whole world doing it. Will the population stand up to these totalitarian governments? Ooh, or whatever the storyline might be. We don't know how this movie is going to end. And at some level, it's kind of exciting. True or false? At some level, if you entertain that possibility. So thank you for the one true in the chat box. There's only one person. I hope you're just enjoying the show. Yeah, we've got a few more truths coming in. Cool, thank you. So these human needs, they are, kind of fundamentals, and they're really cool, and you can apply them to different things. Like I said, if you're unsatisfied in your career or in a relationship or whatever, it's a cool thing to know. So let me just share the final three quickly, because I want you to really focus on the first two in the context of what we're talking about. But the third human need is kind of this, is often referred to as a sense of significance, of love and significance, being relevant to a point, mattering, growth, learning and growth, like evolving. That's another one of the needs that we actually tend to have built in, and we want to, feel that we're actually growing at some level. It's one of the reasons you might be a member of this club and community, is it might satisfy that need for you to, there might be other things that you do, obviously, but at some level, it's satisfying that need. It's also hopefully giving you some variety. You didn't know what was going to happen tonight. So, or most of the meetings, you don't really know what's going to happen when you show up or when you go into join in and say, hey, we had some resources. Oh, there's some variety there. But there's also some certainty, because there's a similar message that carries through, and I'm not ashamed of that. I'm very proud of that. It's cool that we have a core message. Be here now, be still now, be willing to let go. Look where you can serve in your life. Look where you might want to quieten your mind and have So we have there's some certainty in there too. Some touch points during your evening infotainment. When you tune in for these things, there's some certainty as well as variety. And the final one is a sense of contribution. The final human need is to feel that you're contributing somehow, and there is some sort of, you're making a difference. There's some sort of legacy that's ultimately being formed, whether that's a legacy and a difference through raising a family, or making an impact through a particular career, or helping with charities or in the community, or whatever. This sense of contribution can be really satisfying. So then we've got the 5 human needs: certainty, variety, significance, growth, learning and growth, and contribution. Can you relate to these guys? Can you see how these are showing up in your life? And if you apply them to, let's say, a relationship that you might not be totally satisfied with, then what of the human needs aren't currently being met in that relationship? Has the variety dropped down and the certainty gone up? Are you not really feeling as acknowledged as you'd like to, and significant to that other person? Is there a chance to contribute, or do you not really feel that what you do makes much of a difference? So you couldn't really care if you're there or not, or whatever. So, these sorts of human needs are actually really cool, because without creating a huge drama, you can actually just take some charge, and take charge to a certain extent, and look to see where you can inject a little bit more variety into the relationship, or see where you can maybe learn more about that person, or with that person, or whatever. Okay. And if you're not feeling very significant, then maybe they aren't too. So you can start to make sure they know how much you care and how important they are to you, and that sort of stuff, because as you give, it often comes back. So is that clear? We've got yes, definitely, yes, absolutely, totally, and it all makes sense. Fantastic. Now, these are human needs. They're the human needs. And to a certain extent, as one awakens and transcends the mind and the ego, we, to a certain extent, don't need them as much. We don't need them as much. They become more like preferences, which is lovely in and of itself, because there's a lot less pressure on life to be a certain way or give you anything for you to be okay. And when I was considering this earlier, what came to mind was how or should I say, the more and more we wake up to who we really are and the true nature of reality, what tends to happen is we become more spiritual. We become more divine. Dare I say it, we become more godlike. I said it. What I mean by that is if you were to imagine a bright being of light, an angel, if you like to call it that, just appearing in the corner of your room right now. Just appeared like this huge, 6, 7, 8 foot, however high your ceiling is, let it be that tall. So it's not having to crouch over, So this being of light, this divine being of light just appears in the corner of your room, and you consider what sort of virtues does that being have? Well, what sort of virtues do you think that being might have? Give me a few in the chat box. We've got one. Moira says love. Okay, perfect. Nora says joy. Awesome. What sort of virtues? Light, peace. What sort of traits? What might be they possess and be able to share? Compassion, patience, stillness, presence, unconditional love, being of service, truthfulness, compassion again. Absolutely, guys. And so the more we awaken, the more we become and embody all of these kindness, absolutely. We embody all of these beautiful states of being, which we've ultimately been the entire time. And when I say more spiritual, more divine, more godlike, what I'm referring to is whatever you would imagine that being of light might possess, then that's what I'm referring to. It's the easiest kind of way to kind of make sense of this and make it real for us. Now, as long as we are committed to walking what's often referred to as the path of comfort, we're often kind of tied to only really trying to get by and survive and satisfy the human needs. A lot of our focus is on just kind of this kind of keeping the human happy, keeping the mind happy, not suffering too much. And I don't know if you've been around for a while, you'll know that I often talk about the path of the hero and the path of comfort. Now, the path of comfort is very much a meandering path. Okay, it's very much a meandering path. And what I wanted to share with you tonight was some of the traits of the path of comfort that I haven't actually shared before, if that's right with you. Would that be of interest to anybody? Can I have a nod at the top? You got a thumbs up from Moira? Cool. So this will all make sense when we get through this, why I've started with the 3 Fs, moved into the human needs, and now ended up talking about the path of comfort and the path of the hero. I'm not so sure about where we're going to end up either, but I'm sure it will all come together in the end. No, I'm just joking. Kind of. So here's a few things that I've discovered about the path of comfort. The path of comfort is, well, first of all, before we get into necessarily the new stuff, I just want you to, as a wee reminder, the path of comfort is the path where we believe that we're separate from our heart's highest hope. So if you want peace or love or joy or any of these things that were listed in that box, patience, kindness, compassion, unconditional love, stillness, presence, if any of these things you would like, well, the path of comfort believes you ain't that. Sorry, you're well, at least you're not it yet. And in order to be it, you have to do the groundwork, and you have to fix stuff and change stuff and prove stuff about yourself. Eventually, to prove yourself as worthy of being able to be these things, and learning the skill of love, or the skill of peace, or whatever, so that eventually you can arrive at your happy place. The path of comfort is a rainbow path. It's we're looking to try and get to the end of the rainbow, but every time we get there, it moves a bit further away from us. It reminds me of is it the dog or the donkey or whatever that's got the mule, I'm trying to, the thing where it's got like the goat, the carrot that is trying to walk and it's going to stick in a rope. What animal is that, guys? Does anyone remember? A banana? That's not an animal, Nora. No, that's a different analogy that you're thinking about. Donkey, exactly. So we've got a donkey. That was really confusing. Monkey, banana, what? So we've got a donkey, and it's got like a something it really likes to eat, but it's hanging off a rope on a stick in front of it, and it's kind of walking towards it. And that's really the path of comfort. Whatever your carrot might be, peace, love, joy, or whatever, the donkey can't quite get it. The path of comfort is a slow path. It's a path about arriving and eventually becoming. Okay. But incidentally, it's not very comfortable. It's not very comfortable at all. It's called the path of comfort because a lot of our choices, the majority of our choices on a daily basis, are governed by what we believe is most comfortable. It's kind of like the safe path. I don't like what I have, but for fear of losing what I don't actually like, I'm not going to really go for what I really want. That's kind of the mentality on that path. I know it doesn't make much sense when we say it that way, but that's kind of, my friend once described it as better burnt toast than no toast at all. Better burnt toast than no toast at all. So we could call it the better burnt toast than no toast at all path if you want, but it's a bit of a tongue twister. So I like we just call it the path of comfort. Now, the path of comfort is rooted in sensory betterment. Sensory betterment, because ultimately it's searching for personal comfort. By sensory betterment, we're talking about a nice, comfortable environment. We're talking about, the senses, sensory. See, hear, touch, taste, smell. It's all about trying to make it as nice and comfortable as possible. They might go, well, what's wrong with that? There's nothing wrong with that. But the primary focus that's governing and causing us to quite often compromise on what we ultimately really want in life and stay where we are for fear of losing what we don't actually want, is this kind of sensory betterment. The path of comfort is about waking up within the dream. Waking up within the dream. The path of the hero is about waking up from the dream. From the dream. So what does it mean to wake up within the dream? Well, that's where we do a lot of self-help, personal development, and spiritual concept gathering. So waking up within the dream is where, if you say it slightly differently, you could say waking up within the illusion. Okay. Why do I like to offer a path? For example, with my one-on-one mentoring guys, why do I try to offer a path that helps you to change the mind, but the context of the whole conversation is ultimately within the context of rediscovering who you really are, rediscovering the present moment, rediscovering this inner presence of peace and stillness that you are. Why offer both? Well, because if we only seek to perfect the mind and emotions and spend our whole life moving the furniture of the mind around, or at least giving it a polish or a clean, or getting rid of bits you don't like and trying to bring in new concepts that you do like, if we only spend our whole life just trying to think better and feel better and have prettier imaginations and have a prettier self-image, a prettier idea of ourselves, if we only spend our life doing that, ultimately we're waking up within the dream. Does that make sense? Because it's all happening within the dream world, the mind world, the imagination, the memories, and all that sort of stuff. Nothing wrong with doing that, especially if you have some sort of pattern or compulsion or health issue or whatever, and it might have a mind-based cause. So I'm not saying any problem with that. But if you're interested in the path of the hero, then ultimately you want to be also simultaneously, and I would dare I say it, more interested in waking up from the dream. Waking up from the dream. This is relevant because everything that's happening in the world is part of the dream. Especially the fears and frustrations and the fatigue that occurs as a result of what's happening in the world, they are ultimately happening because our sensory betterment is getting challenged, let's say. And the fears that we have, many of them actually haven't happened yet. What might happen with the economy? What might happen with the medicine? What might happen with whatever? They're not here yet. So if there's already fear about that, we know that that's not happening in the here and now reality yet. It's happening somewhere else. Now, we will have another meeting if that does actually happen in the here and now, and we'll cross that bridge then. But right now, we're talking about where we are today, okay? And how come fear, frustration, and fatigue is showing up so much. There's another F as well, but I can't talk about it here. Some people are just thinking that other F. It ends with it, or that's the second word, but you know what I'm saying. Anyway, if you don't get that, don't worry about it. The path of comfort is about creating a better life. The path of the hero is about waking up to the source of life. I like that one. Do you like that one? I like that one. The path of comfort is about creating a better life. The path of the hero, the path that we're talking about here, is about waking up to the source of life. Now, there's nothing wrong with creating a better life. The cool thing is that when you're walking the path of the hero, which has also been known as the path of the sages, it's been known as the path of joy, it's been known as the bright path. It's had many different names over the years. When you're walking that path, you are waking up to the source of life and awake to that, conscious of that. Quite magically, you receive the invitations and the inspirations required to create a better life. But it doesn't necessarily come from an individual me trying to create my life better. It happens through you, but not necessarily by an individual you. Feel free to ask questions or whatever if any of this isn't landing. So don't worry. You can still create a better life if you choose to also wake up to the source of life. But we can be trying to create a better life forever and never find full satisfaction, peace, love, joy, fulfillment, because ultimately we are still missing the source of life itself. And this is nothing religious. It's nothing to believe in. It's not a new concept to pick up. It's an invitation to go beyond the temporary thoughts and thinking, the temporary emotions, temporary physical stuff, and the betterment of the furniture of your life circumstances, so that you can find and rest into this underlying self and reality that is beyond and the context of all the temporary life stuff that happens to show up within this source context of life. And very relevant for now, the path of comfort is focused primarily on preserving life, whereas the path of the hero is about living now. In other words, there's a big focus on the path of comfort for trying to be here as long as humanly possible. Now, obviously that's nice, and it's we can have the preference to, stick around. Hopefully, we want to stick around here as long as possible. But the primary focus on the path of the hero is not preservation. It's not about time. So it's not about the future and how many future moments I might have. This moment sucks. I'm giving it no attention and I'm living in fear and struggle, but at least I get longer. At least I get to be here longer, to suffer a bit longer and to be a bit stressed a bit longer. And I'm being a little bit, tongue in cheek here. Jill says it's not quantity, it's quality. That's a really cool way of putting it. Now, I'm not saying you can't have both here. I'm saying you can know when listening to this sort of dialogue and conversation if secretly inside there's a lot of focus on quantity and preservation, and there's not actually much focus on the richness and aliveness of right here and right now, and giving absolutely everything to this moment, So filled up with now that there's no care or time or attention to worry about what might happen next. Now, don't worry. You don't become uncaring. You still have the sense of responsibility and what I mean that in a good way. Like, you make sure the bills are paid and you go to work and all that sort of, you have discernment. But you don't have dread or fear or worry about what might happen later. You're all about being here now. So in the context of preservation and living fully, I asked Jill to find that quote in the book, which you probably have all read in the chat box by now anyway. But if you haven't, or you're watching the replay, because you can't see the chat box if you're watching the replay, then let me read it to you. Life should not be a journey to the grave with the intention of arriving safely in an attractive and well-preserved body, but rather a skidding sideways, champagne in one hand, strawberries in the other, thoroughly used up, totally worn out, screaming, "Woohoo, what a ride." I love that. Thank you for the clap, Lynn. Thank you. I love that quote. It's quite contrary to some self-help personal development opinions out there, but I love that. I love it. I want to be thoroughly used up by the time I skid in sideways into my personal grave. I want every last bit of me used up. Every potentially thing I learned, every gift and talent and ability, I want to have given it away as much as humanly possible. And I want to just be thoroughly used up. And unfortunately, some people are so scared. They're just trying to survive longer. And there's nothing wrong with surviving longer. I've got to do all these caveats so I don't get, called out by the shame police. But you know what I'm saying, don't you? There was this diagram I saw in a course once, and the guy kind of had his whiteboard, and he kind of did these triangles on the board. And then, my pen's obviously running out, which is perfect timing for that. But he did these triangles on the board, and I'm like, what is he doing? Is he drawing little mountains or something? And it turns out what he was doing, he was drawing shark fins. And he was saying how lots of people, as they grew up, they learn more and more things to be scared of, frightened by. And these are their sharks. And often these sharks are happening between their ears. And these sharks kept appearing more and more often all over the place, to the point that they end up living in this tiny little bit. And this is what they call their life. When the potential is all this and beyond the page, they end up living in this little bit here. Now, guys, don't let this happen. See anywhere where you're scared of a shark, and don't let it stop you from moving through your day anyway. I don't want this kind of life. This is not the skidding sideways life. This is the path of preservation and survival and fear and what's going to happen. I was asked today by someone in my Instagram page for one of the questions. They said, "Where do you go when you die?" And I was like, my current opinion on that is this: our body tends to go to the earth, or the air, or the elements, whatever you want to call them. But the rest of us, who we really are, what we really are, cannot die. So the question in itself is flawed. Where do we go when we die? The question itself is flawed. We can't die if we were ultimately never born. And we're eternal. And eternal is eternal and eternal. It's eternal. Like eternal. All time. You know, sometimes we think eternal is it was born and then it's lived a really long time, right? That's kind of the idea of eternal. Do you know what I mean? Like it's really, really old. But the reality of the word eternal is actually all time. It's always existed. Now, in here, almost impossible to try and figure out from the mind eternal. How's that even possible? Everything has to have had a start and a beginning. But the beginning is eternally now. It's always been now. It's the same now as it's always been. But what we really are is not physical. It's not a thought. It's not an emotion. It's not the body. You know, if I last year lost the end of my little finger, it's growing back now. I remember my index, one of my fingers. See, I even forgot which finger it was. It's grown back. But when I lost it and I saw it like sitting on the chopping board, which Maharani was like, I wasn't missing a bit of me. My body was missing a bit, but I was fully intact. And that aspect of the I that was fully intact is the aspect that was never born and was never dies. Yes, we currently have this nervous system, which is like almost a focal point for the awareness to look out from. It's a focal point for physicality and senses to exist so that we can have a physical experience, a human experience. Okay? Here, so we can have a human experience. Without this, we're just kind of everywhere, always. So this gives us like a focal point to gaze out from, and it's really cool to have this focal point. If we make it about that, however, most people lose the fact that there's this observer and they get too much into what's being observed. And all the focus is on trying to fix, change, and improve the observed, as opposed to just being here for the experience, the full experience. The uncertainty and the certainty, and the opportunities to grow and to contribute and to love.